Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to this webinar and thank you for registering and joining in time. I'll be respectful for all who have joined before the time and I will start the webinar right on time. Let me start by sharing about Tathagat, our speaker for this webinar today. I'm not going to read his LinkedIn profile because I know that after the end of this webinar, that will be the first thing for those who don't know about Tathagat to do. You'll jump to his LinkedIn profile and try to go through his profile. So let me share something which is not there on his LinkedIn profile. Just to have a brief, Tathagat Verma, he's also known as TV in the circles. He's a software professional by education, a computer scientist by accident, a HR student by interest, a project management practitioner by training, curious by nature, learner by habit, teacher by passion, wanderer by choice, digital influencer by the night, servant leader by conviction, and also an author. In short, he's someone who is always busy in learning new things. Tathagat has been involved in high-tech software product development since 1991 with scientific agencies like DRDO and subsequently with multiple reputed global multinationals like Siemens Telecom, Philips Medical, Philips Digital Network, and there's a list of it which you can get off from his LinkedIn profile. Tathagat also holds a unique distinction of being the youngest member of 13th Indian scientific expedition to Antarctica, where he participated as a scientist and stayed at the Indian Permanent Station Maitri for a period of 16 months during the period of 93 to 95, and he studied the data communication between India and Antarctica and the effects of unique weather conditions on life support systems in Antarctica. He holds an academic degree in MSc of Computer Science and a subsequent list of academic degrees. As I said, he was a continuous learner. He is continuing his doctoral from the Indian School of Business right now, and I'm so thankful to him that he has taken out his time out of his regular courses for this webinar. I have been knowing Tathagat for quite long, even before he knew me. I had been following him on LinkedIn, and I was always wondered about this person who was never shy about sharing his knowledge, his point of view, which I always found to be quite intriguing, and sharing his knowledge without prejudice, whether it is his blog, whether it is his webinars or seminars. And I got to meet him in person at IIM Bangalore, and I could feel his humility. I could feel his caring nature for not only individuals but for the profession in general, professional careers or professionals in general, and a person who holds respect for not only his knowledge. There are a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge, but a person who loves to share his knowledge, who loves to uplift people around him. And that is a matter of significance, a matter which sets him aside as a thought leader, as a leader in the industry. So I welcome you, Tathagat, on behalf of this community, and all over to you for this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhijit. Thanks for such a nice and generous introduction, and thanks for this opportunity to talk to some of the people who are, I believe, part of the community that you kind of lead. and I'm sure there must be a lot of other participants from other groups as well. So welcome on a Saturday morning. I know it's not the best time. We are all like going through a lot of incarceration kind of a thing there, but I hope I can make your 1 hour worth it. So let's get started. Uh, can I, Abhijit? Can I request you for taking the screen share control so that I can
Yes,
share?
please. Yes, please.
Okay. So please let me know if you can, if
Yes, I can.
visible. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So we'll get started. I know some people are still joining. So I'll just fill in for a minute actually and then talk about things. We do have the chat window here. So I would really request folks to use the chat window in between. I would like it to be as interactive as possible so that if you have any questions or comments or we'll have time for Q&A towards the end. But just so that we don't break the flow, you can always type in here. I'll be checking the messages on the chat as well. I'll also be asking some questions with you guys, just so that making it a little more interactive for everyone there. So as Abhijit said, I currently work with Walmart Labs. I'm based out of Bangalore. I lead the strategy and operations function. And I'm also doing my doctoral, which is the Executive Fellow Program in Management at ISB Hyderabad. And that's something which is really giving me a lot of new perspectives about how do I improve myself, how do I learn some new things, and so on. And as you will see, a lot of those things will be a kind of a theme of what I'm going to talk about here. So quickly, just some standard disclaimers here. First of all, this is my personal view. It has got nothing to do with my company. Secondly, I'm not an expert on this topic. I just happen to be a fellow practitioner just like you. And I just want to share some of my own learnings here, just so that we all can talk about it. I'm happy to share some of the good and the bad things that I've done and I've learned in that process. And hopefully it helps people. And I mean, I would welcome if anybody wants to share their own perspectives on some of these things as well. In this talk, I'm only going to focus on the professional aspects. I realize that there could be issues when people talk about things like being resilient or having an anti-fragile mindset. There are a lot of perspectives along with that. For example, things like personal finance or physical health or even spiritual well-being. So I'm basically not talking about that. I'm just going to focus on the professional aspect here so that we can keep it focused there. Okay, thanks everyone. Everyone can go on mute, please, just so that we can have the conversation there. Okay, so let's get started there. I'm sure all of us are in a very similar. I mean, somebody was remarking the other day that we are not in the same boat. We are all riding the same storm right now. So when we look at this whole storm that we call as COVID-19, we are seeing very challenging situation for pretty much everyone there. When you look at the well-established brands, and there was this list I found as a part of preparing for this talk from on Forbes, one of the articles, and it had some well-established brand names actually. I mean, names like Cirque du Soleil, which is like, and I mean, I realized I didn't know that they actually had, they are actually eliminating about 3,900 positions in their company. Such a company which has created such a huge niche for themselves, and they are the gold standard in like performance entertainment, and they just are not able to withstand the storm there. Companies like Excite Technologies that have been around for like literally 100 years, or Gold's Gym or Hertz, Intelsat, which launched the first commercial satellite in 65, or big box retailers like JC Penney, and things like that. I mean, the last one here, Wirecard, is actually a company in finance from Germany. You would have seen last week they had actually an issue called out in the audit where they said $2 billion are missing. That's it. They are just missing there, right? So there could be a lot of challenges because of which things are happening there. But the key thing is a lot of well-established brands are going through the storm right now. And it's not just limited to a well established brand alone. If you look at the new age companies, we are seeing some similar kind of challenges happening here. If I mean it This article in entrepreneur.com was very interesting, where the CEO of Airbnb branches, he said it took us 12 years to build, and we lost everything in just 4 to 6 weeks. And like, look at what really happened. Or if you look at WeWork, which has been one of the hottest startups there. I mean, if you look at the rise and fall of the valuation, it has been as meteoric a rise as it has been such a damn squid when it came to like falling down from that pedestal there. So there have been a lot of challenges there for the new age companies also, and these were, mind you, these were supposed to be asset light models, right? So these were supposed to be models where the whole idea was that we are basically working without any asset class, and we are basically working with the purely technology play, where the only thing that you really build is the whole code and the mobile app and the infrastructure. And even then we are kind of seeing challenges there. And it has not spared the individuals like you and me. A lot of us continue to be impacted by that in different ways, shape and form. Some have been directly impacted, some have been indirectly impacted there, and some of the sectors have been very badly hit there. For example, things like transportation has been the biggest impact there. Surprisingly, when I find finance there as the number two, I find little strange, because finance is something where a lot of technology play has already been happening there. To think of it that in today's time and age, with all the connectivity and what have uh, we still have a situation where a lot of cost structures are built around the non-tech part of the business value cycle is little strange right now. But then some of them are uh, like as difficult to digest, but we can rather anticipate them, like travel, because nobody is traveling at this point in time, or aviation sector, and so on and so forth. So the point here is that everybody seems to be getting impacted by some of these challenges there. Now, let me just take a step back and really talk about something, so that we can put all these things into some kind of a perspective or some kind of a framework here, right? So let's talk about something that, even though in India we don't really have a lot of culture around it, but in US they have this big thing, right? The whole Thanksgiving, and there's this whole thing called Thanksgiving turkey. So I hope everyone is familiar with the idea of it, Thanksgiving turkey. Now, imagine if you are the Thanksgiving turkey, and you are being taken care of by your human being, and you absolutely love that human being, right? Because that person who walks on two legs, and you don't know what that person is because you're a turkey, but you love it, the fact that this guy brings you a lot of food, this guy takes care of all the things, smiles, talks to you, and this goes on and on for days and days and days, right? Everything keeps happening there for, let's say, 1,000 days. And then what happens on 1,001 day? Suddenly something changes there, right? So suddenly you have a situation where everything was going fine for all these 1,000 days, and as a turkey your well-being was going on, and then suddenly something happens, a surprise hits you on the 1,001 day, and then you realize what has hit you, and then you suddenly find yourself that you are actually the dinner. So all that care that was being taken care of, it was actually something that was only for well, feeding someone else actually. And then you learn a bitter lesson actually, that just because that's the way it happened to you 1,000 days, it doesn't mean that you can keep on extrapolating that forever. Actually, of course, you're not there to actually make those deductions anymore, but then you basically, if you were still there, you would, that's what you would basically say, that kind of a thing. So I'll just pause here for a moment here. Has anyone, you can just type yes or no, or if anything else you would like to type in the chat box here. Has anyone been through this kind of a situation in their life, or at least in their careers, where you have been in this kind of a situation like the Thanksgiving turkey, where things were all happening fine there, and then suddenly something happened which was like a big surprise or a shock to people there. So just use the chat box here and just type yes or no, and if anyone else would like to type in, feel free to do that. Okay, so yeah, no, thanks for sharing some. It seems like a lot of folks here say yes. In career, it happened, and thanks for people being so candid about also talking about how uh, it has an impact. It had an impact on their jobs, right? So a lot of time, this has been a situation for many of us that it has been an impact there, and so let's just build this whole thing and give it a little more formal shape of that. Many times recently lost a deal. Yeah, I mean, that could happen to you as a deal also. Like you were all set. I have done my journey as an entrepreneur for 3 years, and that time I literally used to be one phone call away from my best day and one email away from my worst day, right? So you get one phone call from your and say, hey, we are on, and you made the proposals for last 2 months and everything's going on, and then suddenly one email comes and says, no, sorry, we will not be able to continue right now. And then you are having your worst day or worst week or worst month, depending on how bad it is, right? So it happens to all of us there, and it can be for multiple reasons that it happens there. Well, there's some way which we might be able to actually talk about it and give it some form. So let's just develop the idea there. Now, there is an author, Nicholas Nassim Taleb, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, or NNT. In short, he also goes by NNT. So NNT wrote this book on black swan, and he gave a very interesting perspective to the black swan, where he said in Europe till 18th century, what happened was that people used to believe that all the swans are white because nobody had seen a black swan. So everyone had only seen a white swan, and they said, "Hey, the swans have to be white by definition." And then after 18th century, somebody went to Australia and they discovered that down there you actually have swans that are black in color. And then the whole mental model changed around that. That hey, okay, the swans can be black as well there. Now, what NNT has done is he has actually built and he has written a book by that name, the Black Swan, where what he talks about is that these are events that have three characteristics. So these are like an outlier or prospectively unpredictable. So sitting today, I cannot say what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So that way it is prospectively unpredictable there. And then second is it has a very high consequence or a very high impact there. And the third one is retrospectively it is predictable. That means if I play the tape back, I'm able to basically go back in time and say, oh, this is why it probably happened there, right? So some of the events that people talk about which would be a black swan event, for example, might be a 2008 mortgage crisis. Somebody talked about that having an impact during mortgage crisis, right? So 2008, if you see, was like a black swan event where it just came totally unexpected, and then it had huge consequences. And then if you now look back in time and say, hey, this is how we were basically selling those securities and all that stuff. So it's not a surprise that it happened there, right? Now, if you look at COVID situation itself, a lot of people would say it was totally unexpected. Although I must add here that NNT in his own interview says that COVID is not a black swan event. He refuses to believe that it was unpredictable event. He's pretty much like, I think, on this with Bill Gates, who literally, when in his TED talks, another one said that hey, the next pandemic is coming, but people just didn't pay attention to that. That aside, the fact that most of us, or pretty much everyone, was caught totally off guard, I would still call it as a black swan event because it was totally unpredictable. It has high consequences. We are expecting more than $2 or $3 trillion of hit in direct economy, let alone the loss of human life and the time it's going to take for businesses to bounce back. And retrospectively, it is completely explainable. I mean, it was in bats and somebody wanted to eat a bat or something. Now, exact way in which transmission happened can still be up for debate there, but it's very easy to assume that it might have come from animals to us there. So it is a black swan event that is what that he talks about basically here, right? So now if we see that if this is how a black swan event really happens there, and it actually creates a situation that whatever we have been doing, it just makes it so fragile and everything just falls apart there like a deck of cards. Then what is the solution there? Because you do all the effort in like building your career, your company, your country, your health, everything there, and comes that one speck of dust which just demolishes or dismantles and everything that is like kind of a fragile sort of a thing there. So now, what is the solution to that? What can we really do that? So I want to show one small video to you so that you can, and I hope you are able to watch it and listen to the sound as well. Such feelings coming over me. There is wonder in most everything I see. Not a cloud in the sky, got the sun in my eyes, and I won't be surprised if it's a dream. I'm on the top of the world. This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. Okay, so this was actually an ad of a cheese, but I hope you were all able to. I know initially you might have, it might have been a little bit of a shock to actually see that mouse being in the mouse trap, but I hope the message was clear, right? I mean, we all get caught into a mouse trap from time to time, and that's not something that we can always control. If you see in the black swan definition, the catching of mouse in the mousetrap was a black swan event. Now, very interestingly, if you think and analyze the black swan, like take a step back and see, the person who put the black swan knew exactly what's going to happen there, right? The mouse did not know what's going to happen. If you go back to the Thanksgiving turkey, the chef knew very well what's going to happen there. For him, there was no surprise in that. There was no black swan element in that. But the individual or the turkey that went through that experience, that was really a black swan event for them. And that is very interesting about it, because when we look at these companies talking about it, or individuals going through a tough point in their career, or many of you alluded to that about your career, it was a black swan event for you, but not for a lot of people who were involved in that process there. So it is in some sense an information asymmetry kind of a thing there. You do not know, and hence you do not know how to really get prepared for some of those things there. Now sometimes it may not be in your control that there's anything you can do about it, but what can you really do to even be prepared for that situation, given the fact that you cannot avoid the happening of it? Is there a way that you can reduce the impact of it? And that is what we really want to talk about it, so that we can, because that's something that is in our control here. So let's because one of the things that's very interesting is, despite the initial few slides that I showed where I talked about how it is getting how it is impacting a lot of companies and people, on the other hand, we also see that the same storm right now that we are going through and riding, it is also creating a lot of opportunities for businesses there. So for example, there are businesses, and I was reading about it, and if you see in the last point, there is a edtech startup in India, White Hat Junior. I have not used it, but it is an education space where it says it was growing 50 to 60% before COVID, and now it is growing 100% plus month on month. That is the kind of a demand it is seeing there. Now one might say that, hey, it is only because people cannot go to the physical colleges and universities, and that's why they are doing it. Fair enough, I'm not disagreeing with that. But the point is, they are definitely acting in a very smart manner to leverage the opportunity that has come as a positive black swan. Black swan does not have to be negative. It could be a positive event which just opens up a windfall opportunity and you actually lap it up there. So if you see here on the top on the left screen, you see there is a website by name covidinnovations.com, and what they are doing is they are basically curating the ideas that a lot of businesses globally are actually coming up with, where they are leveraging the same challenge that others are facing, but they are turning it into an opportunity. And they have more than 900 plus innovations that they are talking about. They have curated on their website from all over the world, where people are having the same challenges, same situation, but they are turning it into an opportunity there, right? And same thing, if you see on the right pane, you will see, for example, the top 10 stocks in Standard and Poor's 500 in 2008, when the global mortgage crisis hit us. If you see here, we had pretty much in all these sectors actually. I mean, if you look at biotechnology or healthcare, we had companies there. If you had even airlines, we had companies actually. So it is not to say that everything was hit because of that. You had obviously discount stores like my company there, which grew 20% in that time. Or you had companies, for example, which were a toys company like the leisure company Hasbro. So the point I'm making here is that for every one example that you can find in the same sector which did not go well, you might be able to find another example, may not be in the same proportion, who still was able to ride the storm better there, right? So the point is that it is not like a bad news across the board. There are people who are able to use that opportunity better. And I believe that by proactively doing certain things, whether you are an organization or an individual, there are opportunities that we can pursue there. So let's understand what is the difference now, what we have here. So what NNT talks about in his book is, he talks about he talks about a triad. He calls it as a fragile, resilient, anti-fragile triad. And he basically talks about going from fragile to anti-fragile, or fragility to anti-fragility. Now what that means is, so he gives an example of fragility, and he says that he actually takes the mythological examples of talking about the whole sword of Damocles. One second. So he talks about the sword of Damocles, where Damocles was in the court actually, and he told the king, and he said, "Hey, your life is good there." He says, "Do you think my life is good? Okay, you become a king." But then when he actually becomes a king for a day, there is this sword that is hanging by one strand of human hair, and he's like, what does that mean?" And he says, "This is what comes with the responsibility. You think everything is good, but then it comes with the responsibility. You make one mistake and you are finished there, right?" So that kind of a context, he calls it as a fragile context, because everything is good, everything is looking fine, but then one small thing can actually disturb the equilibrium and spoil it for, if not forever, for a long period of time. On the other hand, there could be resiliency. For example, the mythological bird animal phoenix, and phoenix is supposed to die, and when you burn it, it gets reduced to the ashes, and it comes back from the ashes once again there, right? So that is resiliency. It doesn't really become better the next time, it stays the same, with the same characteristics, that if you again burn it down, it will again come back. So that is a resiliency that he talks about. And then finally he talks about the mythological creature of hydra. And hydra is supposed to have heads. Actually, if you knock off one head, then two heads grow out of that. And that was the problem when Hercules fought with hydra, that Hercules could not destroy that, and he had to find some other ways of doing it, because hydra was blessed with the anti fragility. So what NNT talks about is that he says that, hey, we don't really seem to have a name for things. So what he says is that some things benefit from shocks. They thrive and grow when they are exposed to volatility or randomness or disorder or generally stress. And these things love adventure, they love risk taking, they love uncertainty. But in spite of the ubiquity of the phenomena, there is no word for the exact opposite of being fragile. A lot of times we use the word antonym as resilience or strong. He says that is not really the antonym for fragile. So he says, let's call it anti fragile. That is the exact opposite of that word. And anti fragility is beyond the resilience or robustness. The while resiliency is all about being able to resist that shock, anti-fragility is really all about even benefiting from that shock and being able to leverage that and getting better. So that's how he basically brings the whole idea of anti-fragility there, right? Now, what does it really mean? So he actually talks about in very simple graph where he says that if you basically look at the gains or loss out of it, and then if you see something which is fragile, then it might be, so for example, think of a ceramic coffee mug, right, or a bone china coffee mug. Now, as long as you are here, if you reduce the stress, that is, if you keep it somewhere, or you wrap it properly, then you are only benefiting out of that kind of a reduced stress to that. But if you increase the stress, that means if you press it hard or if you drop it on the floor, then you are in pain because it breaks off, right? Because it's a fragile item basically. On the other hand, if you are talking about an anti-fragile item, you are basically saying that if I actually reduce the stress on that, then it is actually causing me pain on that one. If I increase the stress on that, it actually gains out of that disorder there. So he says it in a very different perspective there. And I'll give you some examples on that, but I just wanted to pause here for a moment, and if anyone wants to offer any examples that they can think of something that is anti-fragile, feel free to write something in chat box, because I just want to make sure that this idea is clear of what is really anti-fragile about there. So if anyone wants to type it, um, on what might be an example of something. Yeah, working out is a great example. Thanks, Vinod. I was about to come to that. So muscles if are a great example of that. If you don't use the muscles, that is, you are not exercising them, that means you are reducing the stress on that. The muscles actually start weakening there, right? And then if you actually start pushing your muscles or working out, then it actually causes you more gain there. So that there is a clear anti-fragile property there. Weed in the farms could be there. So for example, what Pritam is saying is that weed in the farms, if you let it be there in a small amount and you don't really pull them out there, then maybe it's good, because maybe it is well, I'm not an expert on agriculture, but I can assume that some amount of weed might be good, because maybe the birds will come and pick it up, or the worms will come and pick it up and leave the main crop there. But if there are too many weeds, then it's going to probably create a problem there of resource scarcity, because the same water and fertilizer and nutrients are going to be shared by the weeds there, right, and not leaving enough opportunity for the real plants to grow there. So that could be an example there, but thanks for sharing those two examples. So if I just put all of them on one chart, and then some people have developed this idea even further, you can think of 3 or 4 ways in which the whole response to the stress can happen there. So if you see here, the orange line or the reddish orange line is really about being fragile. So what happens is, when you put the stress on a body or an object, to some aspect it gains, because there is some element of gain there, but at some point in time it breaks off, and when it breaks off, it actually, there is no point of return. It just goes into a negative gain here, so it goes into the losses here. So those are fragile properties there. On the other hand, there might be objects or systems where it grows and it is able to resist for a certain period of time. For example, you might actually have like for example, a football, and you are actually pressing the football, and it's able to resist the pressure of that for some period of time. And then maybe at some point in time, if the pressure is too much, then it might break off. So at that point, so we would call something like that as a robust system or a robust object there. On the other hand, there might be objects there that actually are able to adapt themselves very well against that, and they are able to basically grow till the point that they can actually be there, and you might call them as resilient there. And then there might be things that they are able to innovate actually, and then you would call them as anti-fragile. Well, NNT actually doesn't make that distinction. He only talks about 3 categories. Some people have actually added this, but it's a good graphic that gives a good perspective of how these 4 objects can be seen here. So I'll just let you think it. But my question would be, some of you must be wondering that is it such an esoteric idea? Does it even make sense there? But actually, if you think of it, it doesn't seem to be that esoteric. It seems to be rather commonplace. For example, Wolff's law in medicine or biology is there, that says that bones in a healthy person or animal adapt to the load. So the more load you put there, the stronger they get to that one actually, which is very similar to what we talked about, the muscular working out part of it. Or in general, the hormesis is a property there, that within that hormetic zone, there is a favorable response to low exposure to toxins and other stressors. So the best parallel I could think of is, for example, in Indian old stories that you might have heard of Chandragupta Maurya, or during those time there was this whole concept of Vish Kanya, right? And the whole idea there was that they were specially trained from the childhood to basically take a small amount of toxins or poisons, so much so that that small dosage would not kill them, but over a period of time they would become so lethal that anybody who comes in contact with them would perish there, right? So they are basically, that could be one way to think of that. Neuroplasticity in recent years is an idea that has been that has caught up actually, that even after injury or old age, your brain can still learn there if you subject it to workouts, right? It's the same thing as a physical workout, that we call it as a mental workout, for example. You might talk of chaos engineering. Some of you might be familiar with that. In our industry, there's a lot of chaos engineering work, that you're basically saying that, hey, you're subjecting the system to so many shocks so that you are able to see how system behaves, and then and then as a part of it, you are basically hardening the system there. And when it comes to people, I think the list is endless, right? We have heard of so many people who have come through adversities, and every adversity has only made them stronger there. J.K. Rowling, she started writing when she was divorced, and she had no support, and she typed everything and wrote the Harry Potter series. And she didn't even have money to photocopy the document to send it to the editors, so she used to type out the entire 90,000 word manuscript just so that she could send it to the people, right? So there are all kind of examples that we have seen. We have heard about Colonel Sanders, the creator of KFC, being rejected like 1,000 times plus, and nobody would listen to him, but he just kept getting stronger and stronger. And those who would have seen the movie on Ray Kroc, the founder, the entrepreneur, the founder of McDonald's, of how he would just go and try and sell the milkshake machine there. So I think those stories are really a lot about the whole idea, in my view, of anti-fragility there. So then the question comes, how do you become anti-fragile? We've been introducing the whole idea there. How do you really become anti-fragile? So I want to share some of the perspectives that I won't claim myself as an anti-fragile, but I do believe that I am on the path that allows me to think how do you become anti-fragile, and being able to go through, because when you build a long career, you have gone through a lot of ups and downs, you're able to understand and really build some of them. So I think I would put them in these three big categories here. Embrace uncertainty, build redundancies, and develop options. And I'll talk about each of them in the three slides here. So let's see, what is embrace uncertainty. What I mean by embrace uncertainty would be that you are basically, a lot of times we seek safety in comfort zone. So we are just sitting there and saying, this is my zone of familiarity. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I know how I'm going to solve the problems. I'm signing up for the things which actually give me. So I'm actually sitting in an echo chamber. I'm just listening to myself. I'm avoiding any contact with something that is unknown, uncertain, new, and so on and so forth. And what NNT argues is this exactly is the kind of behavior that creates fragility, because fragility is really all about creating that kind of a support environment and not exposing yourself to the shocks. So if you don't expose yourself to the shocks, you are living in a very safe and contained world, and hence you never develop the immunity to uncertainty. You never become stronger to the shocks there. So what could be the ways to basically do that? I would say there are three ways in my view. One is work on new areas, so you be able to really think of it and say, hey, these are something new there. I would traditionally, so I'm a front end engineer, for example. I have never thought of doing anything in a back end or a database there. Well, maybe it's a good opportunity for me to just go and see, hey, let me do something in databases. I'll find something new, and maybe I will learn something in that process there, which will make me better there. um, then second could be accepting risky projects. A lot of times we think, no, I don't want to really do that, or that's really a difficult thing. it has been running late there. A lot of people who have tried to do that, they are not able to solve it. Some people even lost the job because of doing it. Well, one of the ways of looking at that would be, why not we just go and sign up for something, because you will learn something in that process there. And there's no It's possible that other people might have failed because of some other reasons, but you are able to learn from their failures, and basically you are able to do better than that there, right? So there could be an opportunity that basically might be there. And then lastly, on this particular point, could be proactively seeking the problems there. A lot of times we seek familiarity. We say, oh no, this is really a problem, stay away from this thing, because I don't think this is really going to be a lot with that. But you are basically when you change your mindset and say, okay, let me go and actively seek something complex, something problem there, and then that way I'm really subjecting myself to a little amount of it. Now I'm not saying that you basically sign up for, like, for something which is 10,000 times bigger than you, but you basically take the baby steps towards embracing the uncertainty, so that small failures are not going to kill you by itself, but the small failures are really going to make you better tuned. Your immunity system is going to get better tuned to doing something like that. In complexity theory, some of you might have heard of Dave Snowden's Canadian framework. He talks about safe to fail as one of the mechanisms for the complex situations. So safe to fail is a very parallel perspective, I would say, where instead of doing a fail safe, you are doing a safe to fail kind of a thing there, right? And that is how you are basically building a little bit of a resilience and ability to kind of leverage those uncertain points there. Next one I would say is build redundancies. A lot of times we don't have redundancies in the system, and what has happened is, in our rush towards efficiencies, and in fact that's one of the things that if you look at the lean movement, while the lean movement is very good, it also creates challenges, because as long as everything is fine, you are fine. But then, as some of you might be lean practitioners would know, lean doesn't like inventory, lean doesn't like buffers, lean doesn't like having any kind of safety cushions really there. So what if the safety cushions are gone? Like, this COVID has seen that our supply chains got disrupted in a big way there. Now you have a situation where you don't have anything to fall back upon. You are not able to basically do, because you've been operating so lean. Just because you've been keeping the cost low and you are able to do it just in time, there is something else to be compromised there, because it is, I mean, it is, in some sense, it is not like this is a zero sum game. You gain something, you lose something. You just have to determine what is more important for you there. It's not like pushing the envelope per se there. So when you have a COVID kind of a situation where your supply chain is totally disrupted, those things come to the fore. So how can you build some more redundancies as an individual in your own system? In my view, the first step towards building a redundancy would be to first make time. I continue to meet a lot of people who say, oh, I don't have time. I mean, when I tell people I read about 100 books a year, and people look at me and say, this guy must be faking. Actually, I don't think anybody has time to read 100 books a year. And I'm not talking about reading the book summaries. I never read book summaries. I only read books there. And those of you who are interested can follow me on Goodreads, because I update on Goodreads the books that I read there. How do I find the time there? I have the same time as any of you have, 24 hours in a day. Well, multiple things there. One, during some of the years I was lucky that I had a shorter commute to office there. Now, a lot of people have a shorter commute there, but what do they do with their spare time? They come and watch TV, and they come and they have parties and do. Yeah, you have to decide your priorities. I make time for reading the books. I make time for my PhD. I make time for doing something that I believe or I value there, for example. I had a long commute. Some people say I have a long commute. There's nothing I can do about it. A few years back, my commute became long, so I was spending like 1.5 hour one way to office there. I realized that this is not the life that I'm looking for. I immediately switched over to the podcast, and I started using that time, instead of listening to the radio jingles and all the nice things to hear, but they were not adding value to me. I swapped them with the podcast basically and audiobooks. So you have to make time for what you really believe is important for them, and that gives you that extra ability to think and acquire some new ideas there. Second would be pursue side projects. A lot of times people are always caught and say, I mean, I literally get every week one mail from an old friend in there who says, hey, the job that I was doing, or even the job family that I was part of, is getting eliminated there. And that's really a terrible situation there. And I always ask them, well, have you, I mean, if I Google your name, what am I going to get there? Am I likely to get some tweets that you have written? Am I likely to get some articles you have written? Am I likely to get some talks that you have written? Am I likely to get some videos that you have posted on YouTube about something that you have found there? Am I likely to find some controversial views that you have raised there? If I'm interviewing with you and you are my hiring manager, before the interview, if I go and look up your name on the search engine, what am I going to find there? Am I likely to find 500 links there? Am I likely to find 10 links? Am I likely to find 10,000 links? What does that tell about what you are doing there? Are you pursuing side projects? Are you mentoring startups, for example? Are you teaching at a college? Are you part of a volunteer NGO organization that is really helping people achieve what they would like to do that there? So in short, the point I'm making is, how are you really growing yourself in terms of building those redundancies there? I'm not saying that the idea should be that, what if I lose the job today, what am I going to do, and that's why I build the redundancy by pursuing a side project. Of course not. I don't think we should be living in that fear. We should be living with the spirit of an explorer and say, oh, this is an interesting idea. I wish I knew about it. Let me go and learn something. Oh, this new programming language has come there. Let me go and do that. In our industry, I continue to find people who have stopped programming after 5 or 7 years because they feel that programming is for engineers and my job is only to become a manager there. Well, my point is, for example, I've been in the industry for 28 years, and I still feel whenever I see something new, I want to learn something. Can I learn this new programming language? Can I learn about some new ideas that have come in the cloud, for example? Can I build something and make something so that I'm able to do that there? Right. So the whole idea there is really that in order to pursue it, by pursuing it, you are able to actually build some of these redundancies actually. And the third thing I would say add here is basically expand your network. The more you talk to the people, the more you realize that there are so many problems, so many interesting ideas, so many things that people are pursuing. And I always like to say that if you think you are the saddest person on earth, if you think that you are the biggest victim on earth, you have not spoken to people. Because when you speak to people with genuine empathy, you will realize that people are having other kind of challenges. Maybe some of that challenge actually gives you an idea to solve their problems and say, hey, I think I can help you with that. I think I know somebody else who might be able to think of that, right? So some of those ideas actually give you that perspective, which actually expand your thinking and help you build some of the redundancies in terms of how you use your time. What are the opportunities for you? Are you just a guy with just two lives? One is the office, one is the home, and you don't really have anything else that you can do that to even motivate yourself, to even distract yourself. Or you are a person who is basically continuously drawing from multiple wells and learning from there. You have a community of let's say people who are doing a lot of work on blockchain, and you have another community of people who are doing a lot of gardening, and you have a community of people that you are part of where you are building a lot of for example, assets on something else, and you are basically learning and cross pollinating some of these ideas. So that is the whole perspective of really building that redundancy. And the last point I would add here is really on developing the options. It's very important that we have options, because if we don't have options there, it is of no use there. So how do we develop those options really? In my view, learning is the most important thing that can, I can never overemphasize on how important learning is to that. For me personally, that is the reason that has drove me to basically go for a PhD right now, because I believe there is so much to learn there which I never had a chance to learn when I was doing my masters, or in between years that I have now dedicated myself to actually thinking as a researcher and really challenging the notions of ideas there. I believe that everyone should go back to the school and learn. And it doesn't mean that you have to drop from the job. There are so many things now. Everyone is doing digital anyway, so there is enough opportunities to keep learning there. The second thing, that the last 2 points here is actually what NNT talks in the book on the anti-fragile, which is the title of the book. He calls it as practice via negativa and pursue barbell strategy. So I'll show you one slide on each of those points there. just to illustrate what it really means there. So he talks about practice via negativa as a concept where he says, he actually, if you listen to some of his talks, he talks about the fact that in his family everybody is a diabetic and he did not have diabetes. And he actually said there was this institute in Siberia or somewhere that basically taught people, or teaches people for like 100 years, how to reduce the elements in your food that will actually make you diabetes proof in some sense, or it will, at least it will allow you to reverse the diabetes. And the point here being that a lot of times you actually keep adding things there to something, and that actually adds to the fragility. And he says that anti-fragility is really all about eliminating things from there, which will allow you to subtract and really become simple, and that actually will make you anti-fragile. So less is more is what he really talks about there. Now when I read the book and I was thinking from some of the things that I have been part of, I was able to think of three things that really helped me during those years. So long back when I was in one of the jobs, and a lot of us had I mean, we would just go and gripe. I mean, we were all junior engineers, young engineers. We would just go and say, oh, this guy is getting so much of salary, oh, this person got promotion, and oh, how come I don't think he deserved the promotion. In short, there was a lot of negativity in the group, and we were like 10, 15, 20 people who would have long coffee breaks and long tea breaks and only talk about the negativity. I call it as the noise. And I realized that that noise was as tempting as it was, but it was actually killing me. I had to get out of that place and I had to eliminate that noise. And that, in my view, was the best decision I ever made, because after that, it's been like 15, 20 years and more. I have never been part of that kind of a gossip where I'm just actively gossiping and saying, oh, this person is getting so much of money, and you are getting into this whole cycle of depression and kind of a thing there. By eliminating noise, you are basically, first of all, clearing up your mind and saying, hey, this is what I really want to focus on. And now you can get to the whole point of generating more options about what you can do. Otherwise, you are not even thinking about any of them. The second thing which I found was a very interesting perspective is what Honda actually actively pursues, is what they call as kick out the ladder. And that's exactly how they call it. So Honda has this whole thing, and it's been, I think, from the time Mr. Honda built the company, that what they believe in is that when you build some team there, they deliberately, what they do is, okay, they never allow the team to really hit a steady state, or like a equilibrium. The moment the team seems to be nearing an equilibrium, they basically metaphorically pull the ladder out. So I don't know what it really means in a practical sense, but if I had, let's say, a team of, I need 7 engineers on the team there, then I can imagine that maybe I get 7 engineers, everything is fine. Now one engineer goes out of my team there. Now suddenly, as a manager, I am forced with a little bit of a crisis, if you will, right? And that crisis allows me, or forces me, to think and say, how can I really now salvage the situation back? How can I really find a more effective way, or how can I find a more better way to actually deal with the situation there? Maybe I'll become smarter in my use of automation. Maybe I'll become smarter in the use of looking at what should I work it, or maybe I will look very hard at the rework that is happening, or the defect that I'm creating, so that I can, instead of cleaning up downstream work, I can go and do an upstream cleanup there, right? So that I don't need that many people to be on the project there. Just because I have a budget doesn't mean that I should have 8 people on my team. So I think the whole mindset really of kicking out the ladder, in my view, is a wonderful metaphor to think of it and say, well, how can I really uh, keep getting better than that? And lastly, that leads to the whole idea of constantly improvising. So you are constantly looking at it and saying, okay, now we are doing it this way, it is taking me 1 week there, how can I do it faster than that? So if you look at the Toyota way of Toyota production system, I mean, one of the examples that you would come across is that when they would get the parts from other suppliers, they realized that it would take them like maybe some 2 seconds to actually put a screw in one of those items. And they said, hey, how can I really remove that two seconds out of that assembly process? And they said, why don't you as a supplier just put the screw in the item and send it to us, so that we don't have to do it when we are on the assembly line there, right? Because offline effort doesn't count there. the lead time that it counts is really how much is on the assembly line there. Now those could be the ways in which you are constantly improving yourself. In fact, Toyota has a wonderful, it's not from Toyota, but somebody wrote it actually, a wonderful book with a very provocative title, which actually says 40 years, 40, I actually have that one. It says 40 years, 20 million ideas. So between 1951 to 1991, during the 40-year period, Toyota actually generated 20 million ideas. And those were the ideas that really got them constantly improving. Now, it is not just via negativa that you are removing those things. You are actually building gradually the system. You are subjecting it to constant improvement so that the fragility is not setting in there. So you are eliminating those things there one by one so that it becomes more and more anti-fragile there, right? So that's the whole idea that he talks about of via negativa. And the last point here I would say is the whole, what he calls as the barbell strategy. And the barbell strategy is exactly like in when you go to a gym to work out, you basically have these barbells which have weight on both the sides of it. So what he says there is that you actually pursue a bimodal strategy. That means you pursue your strategy on the either extreme. So on one extreme, let us say you have a negative black swan. So you have to play safe in that, right? Because you know that this is a risky thing. You play very safe in that area there, and you basically become robust to that. So that your strategy is that, oh, for example, you have a high risk of inflation. Now, if you have a very high risk of inflation, what are you going to do? Well, what you do is you basically put a lot of money in government bonds, like the treasury bonds, for example, because the treasury bonds are risk free investment. So they are not going to have an impact whether the inflation goes up or down. They will still give you the assured investment there. What does it mean in a career sense? In a career sense, you might still go back and say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm still on the basics, I'm strong there. So if it means that work being stuck on, like, the new things, I don't know whether people will be able to do, but I want to make sure my C++ Unix background is safe and secure. So my C++ Unix Java kind of a thing will anyway get me a job there. So that way you are kind of strong in that and you are constantly pursuing it, right? On the other end of the barbell, you are saying that, hey, these are positive black swans, right? So we are saying that now these are opportunities where there is no downside of it. If anything, it is only an upside of it. So you take a lot of risks in that. What could be an example of that? Let us say you have a, your friend comes to you and you have some surplus money and you say, hey, you know what, I'm actually doing this new startup and I'm willing to have a private placement, and because you are a friend, I'm happy to offer you. And you know your friend there, and you say, hey, I don't normally believe in the investment, but you know what, I have already actually secured my negative black swans, and now this seems like a positive black swan, because in the worst case the loss is minimal because he's asking you to put the money at very low markup. But if it really goes 10x or 20x or 50x, then you are actually in a very strong positive black swan scenario. So you are able to really leverage that very strongly there. So in a career sense, what could that mean? You have some new opportunities that are coming in. Let's say there is a new programming language, or there is a new idea in blockchain, or there is something else that's coming up there. You start learning that, and you kind of start proactively kind of go to the bleeding edge of the technology, because there is no downside to that. There is only an upside by actually investing in that strategy there. And it is not that you are putting 100% of your eggs in that basket, because you have secured the negative black swans already. So it's a very interesting paradigm actually that he talks about of the barbell strategy. If you're interested, you should definitely check out his article, because that will give you some very interesting ideas there. Okay, so I think we are at the last slide now. I just want to wrap up the whole thing, and then if you have time, happy to have some questions here. What he talks about is that, take the example of a wind. The wind is the same force that is coming from outside, but if you are a candle, it's a black swan event for you, right? It actually makes you fragile, because the moment there is wind blowing there, it blows out the candle there. But if you are a fire, then the same event, the same black swan event is not actually making you fragile, but it's actually making you anti-fragile actually, which is, the wind actually feeds the fire. So it actually creates an opportunity when you are a fire, that you are actually able to grow. It feeds on air and the wind, and it actually grows stronger and stronger if there is a stronger wind there. So basic idea there of anti-fragility is that we have to develop ourselves in a way that we are able to not just get kind of smashed by the shocks, but we are able to, and not even get to the point where we are resilient to them, that we are able to handle that, but go to the next stage, that you are able to actually leverage it. So you are like the proverbial mythological hydra, that if somebody cuts one head, then you not only develop the head back, because resiliency would be like Ravan's 10 head, right? I mean, if you think in our mythology, you cut one head for Ravan, another one grows. But in the case of a hydra, you are talking about one head going away and two of them coming up. So the hydra really loves that kind of a chaos, uncertainty, or disorder, or the shocks there. Can we do that kind of a thing to ourselves? Can we build our own mindset? Can we build our own professional portfolio? Can we build ourselves as an individual to the capacity that we are kind of playing in a way that we are building a lot of those assets that will allow us to become anti-fragile in the long run? These were some of the thoughts that I wanted to share here. I think I've taken a little bit of time more than what I thought I would do that, but I think I'll pause here there, and I hope it was of some value to you. I'll stop sharing the slide, but I'll get into the camera mode, and I'm happy to have any questions if we have here.
Thank you, Tathagat. I think that was a insightful and I think very thoughtful session. I think you have put everybody on thinking mode right now. So let's give them some time to come back with the question. I think meanwhile there are certain questions. Some questions I can see one question coming from Prasanjit, and maybe we can anticipate some more questions also.
Yeah, yeah. So, Prasanjit, do you want to even just, we are a small group, so you want to just unmute and just ask the question also? Or if not, I can just read it then. So, perceptual equity is ability to see around corners and spot potentially significant anomalies landscape before others do. Do you think this would be essential trait to become anti-fragile? How does one develop perceptual equity? I think that's a very good perspective. One of the ideas that I can share is actually this whole notion of weak signals. A lot of times, people who are actually able to spot the weak signals are the people who are able to start thinking and saying, hey, what could it mean to me? In fact, there is a very famous book on strategy by Vijay Govindrajan, who is a professor of management at Duke's. And he has written this wonderful book on, he has written multiple books, and one of his lovely books is The Three Box Solution. And in the Three Box Solution, he basically says how the companies should innovate. And one of the things that he talks about is this whole idea of listening to weak signals. And uh, it's a finesse in my view. There is no algorithm for that. It's a finesse that we all must develop. But the more an individual is able to essentially develop the ability to spot the weak signals, the better it is for them in order to be better prepared for that. And the best way I can think of is actually to spread your tentacles across and listen to what people are saying in another area. Listen to how people are basically doing. I'll give you one example just to support it and move to another question there, which is like I think Antonio is the guy, right? The founder of Zara, and he Zara is, I mean, he's like in the top five richest people. At one time, he was the second richest man in the world, and he talks about the philosophy of Zara. How does he really build it? As many of you know, Zara is really a fast fashion kind of an item, and what he does is that he doesn't invent the fashion. What he does is he goes out on the streets of Spain, Barcelona, and other places, and he sees what youngsters are wearing, and he basically looks at that pattern and call them as weak signals if you want to, but he sees what youngsters are doing really there, and based on that he goes back to his design team and says, guys, I think youngsters are looking at this kind of a thing and youngsters are looking at that kind of a thing, and he challenges his design team to come up with the fashion on that. And then once they do that, then they, his ability is the supply chain, the way he is able to build it and supply to all his stores literally within 48 hours kind of a thing. That is the amazing part of it. So that I would call the ability to read the weak signals is something which all of us must develop there. So I hope, Prasenji, that gives you some perspective, but if not, do chime in there. Preetham Kumar has a point there. Can you share some personal examples which helped you to achieve the state of being anti-fragile? Well, actually, if you, all of those points are something that, well, I've taken some ideas obviously from the book, but I was trying to give some examples of how they have been useful, and I can relate to each one of the points that I have spoken to you about. So, for example, I have been uh, blogging for 15 years now. That blogging, and I've been talking in conferences. I've done about 400 talks in the last 10 years. And in 2014, when I was giving a talk, somebody came to me. I don't want to name them because that's not the right thing. Somebody came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to? We want you to give us some coaching. We need some help from you." And I said, "Hey, I'm in a day job. I cannot do that. So obviously that would be unethical, but I'm happy to help you if you want to." He says, "No, no, it's a commercial engagement and we want to engage with you." I literally told them, "Okay, don't pay me money. I will still do it," kind of a thing there, and or pay me after six. They said, "No, we have to pay you." I said, "Okay, pay me after 6 months then, because I cannot take money while I'm in a job there." And I had no idea of really starting out at that point in time. But then that discussion led me to the whole thing, and then one more company came to me, and these were big names. And then I ended up actually changing my career and actually became an entrepreneur for 3 years. I ran my own consulting there, where I was actually helping organizations with their transformation programs there. But this was one example for me where something that would have been an agility sorry, a fragility kind of a thing there, where maybe I would not have thought of it, or I would not have been able to do. I proactively pursued that, proactively built it as a part of my anti fragility there, and I was able to leverage it proactively even before something came to me, right? And the whole idea was that once in my career I did come pretty close to being fragile, and after that I took it as my upon myself and said, I'm going to be never in a situation where I am fragile. Now, I cannot control the events. That is not in my hand. The events can happen to anybody. It can happen to you. It can happen to me. It can happen to us any day, including next hour. But my response to that, can I actually prepare myself better for the response? That to me is far more important. So whether it is doing, and I've been doing my exec MBA, I've been doing my PhD, all of them are really meant for me to really keep building my anti-fragility muscle, so that I am better prepared to handle the shocks, and I'm able to create this convexity that NNT talks about there. I don't know how I'll be successful or not, but that's just my belief that those things could be helpful to me. So those were the two questions there, Abhijit. Do you have any questions from anyone else or from your side?
Well, from my side, I would like to ask you. Okay, we talked a lot about individuals being anti-fragile, but when we talk about institutions, they are also a collection of individuals. That makes a institution. How do you turn institutions into anti-fragile? Because if you turn an institution itself into anti-fragile, by nature, it would percolate down to the individuals. So, what suggestions do you give to organizations or institutions to turn into anti fragile? We know we talk about business agility and things, but as a culture, how do you bring in anti fragility within an institution?
I think a lot is to do with the organizational mental models. For example, if you and I would go to the same Vijay Govindrajan's three-box solution, where he actually talks about the three boxes. The first box, he talks about what are you doing well today, and the second box, he says, well, what would you like to do in future? How do you see yourself? And the third box is actually stop doing what you are doing today in order to get to the box to the future state there. A lot of organizations don't realize it, that in order to proactively get ready for that, they need to really build the culture that supports that kind of a proactive thinking, that supports that kind of ability to fix something that is not broken. Most of the organizations are little uncomfortable with the idea there, right? There's like, hey, don't touch it. If it is working, don't touch it, right? That kind of a thing there. And we allow the problems to fester for a long period of time, and then suddenly we get into a situation where we realize, oh my goodness, we are sitting on a burning platform here. Well, a lot of burning platform, the smell is already visible from a long distance. If only we were paying attention to that from a short period of time. And then the last point, which is really about stop doing things, the proverb of that would be burn the boats. The burn the boats is the kind of a metaphor that is
Yes,
like Columbus reaches America and then he says, "Hey, burn the boats." And burn the boats means you cannot go back to the old way of doing things there, right? That means you are now permanently wedded to the new way of things. So I think organizations, in my view, have to start thinking of fixing things that are not yet broken in some sense, and proactively look for opportunities to to build some new ideas. It's a longer topic, but
Yeah, I understand.
quick pointers.
Thank you so much, Tathagat. One last question I would have, and that's for the entire community. What would be the top five skills you would suggest in today's disruptive age every individual should pick up?
Okay, that's a tough question. The first thing I would say, first and foremost, and I'm assuming that all of us in some way, shape, or form are from technology or associated areas, right?
Yeah.
From the tech sector, right? If you're not from a tech sector, not to worry. Just substitute that with the core thing that you are saying, right? So the point I'm saying is that it, it doesn't matter what is your role today, whether you are a manager or a leader or somebody. My first and topmost advice will be go back to the basics. Go back to the basics and learn programming once again and start coding things and start building things there. Start being a hands-on person. If you have not coded for 20 years, your fragility is very high. Start getting into the whole idea. And the good thing about technology is that every 3 months there is a new technology coming up, so you never are like falling behind. Never have any shame in asking people. Go to the youngster that is out of the college and say, hey, will you mentor me? Can you tell me how this thing works there? I want to learn there. People might look at you once, but they will not look at you twice. They will say, oh, this guy is a cool dude, this person wants to learn so much. And they will, as a leader, have more respect for you when you start to learn there. So I would say, first thing, everything else being equal, start learning the new things there, I would say. Second is, if you are in any kind of a managerial or a leadership role, uh, at least that's been my learning personally, I would say. I've been in leadership roles for about 20 years, and I've been country head since 2003 2004 time frame. But the most life altering moment for me was in 2007, when when I took the role of a dotted line leader, uh, more formally as a servant leader, where I saw myself not really as people reporting into me, but my job is really to help people there. I mean, a lot of times when I'm growing in my career as a first line manager, second line manager, I start getting into the wrong measures of success. I think success is measured by number of people reporting into me, or the budget that I am doing, right? So it is like, oh, I have 10 people in my team. Now I should get a promotion, I should become senior manager, I should have 20 people reporting into me. Well, guess what? All of them are useless metrics. The only metrics that counts in my view is how you are adding value to whosoever is paying money to your organization, to your customers. How are you really adding value to your organization there? Measure your self worth in terms of the complexity of problems that your organization is giving you to solve, not by the budget or dollars or headcount that it is giving you to solve there, right? So that would be the second one. Third one is keep learning all the time there. I think it's in some sense relating to the first one, but just go, and it doesn't have to be in your area alone. I remember listening to about 15 years back, listening to a very insightful talk by Sam Petroda. He had come to Bangalore. I think it was a Thai talk, and it was a room full, and he talked about the whole thing of, he said you should have 20 friends. And those 20 friends should be, one should be musician, one should be drama theater artist, one should be biologist, one should be doctor, one should be barber. I mean, the whole idea that he gave was, don't just move around in the people that you are comfortable with, but basically expose yourself to building a bigger network of complementary ideas and people with complementary backgrounds, so that your learning is cross functional, it becomes more holistic, and so on and so forth, right? And the fourth thing I would say is, actually, don't be shy of making mistakes. A lot of times we are really shy of making mistakes, and we say, oh, I would be embarrassed, or people will laugh at me, or people will make fun of me. I don't really, and that's the reason we don't want to try actually there. I mean, just get out, take it out of your mind, and saying that failure is the only way you are going to ever learn something new there. So really get into the whole idea that failure drives learning, right? Failure doesn't drive embarrassment, it drives the learning part of that. And the fifth thing I would say, if I have to just make your list complete, Abhijit, would be, if you feel you got some help from somebody, make sure that you are passing it on to somebody else. The only way we can really build this community and help each other is by paying forward there. So like everything that I talked about in this lecture, except for some of my personal experiences, which might have taken only 5 or 7 minutes, everything else was learned from others, and I'm just sharing it with all of you there. And if you feel you like something, practice something, learn something in the process, just feel free, because we learn a lot by sharing it. Actually, we don't realize that we actually learn a lot by doing it. So those would be my top five. You put me in a spot, but then I hope I gave you some meaningful answer to that.
Thank you very much. They were just on the dot. I think that's a lot of value for every participant to take away, and I'm so thankful to you for taking out your time. I know your time is so important and so busy now that you are going through your doctoral. So thank you very much. May God bless you and take care and be safe. For the participants, let me announce that next week on 8th, we have another webinar by Dr. Uma from UK, and she would be talking on one more interesting topic, and we will come back to you shortly on that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your time. Take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the
Thank
next
you. Thanks,
webinar.
Abhijit. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks everyone for your listening. And I will be posting it on SlideShare and sharing the link with Abhijit so he can share with all of you. And
Thank
stay in
you.
touch. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, TV, this is Vinod Nair. I've had the opportunity to work with you once as well, and it's been a pleasure listening to you today as much as in the past. Thank you.
Hey,
Wonderful, insightful
thanks,
session.
thanks a lot, Vinod. Take care. Bye.